Hey, everyone. Hey, before we get started, I want to tell you about a new series we're starting at the New Stack. It's called the Tech Founder Odyssey, and it is about that journey that technical founders go on when starting a company. This is really about their stories, their journey, the adventures, the tragedies, the people they meet, the scary things that they come to meet along the way. It's really all here for you to learn about what these companies are like when they get started, how people grow them, how they manage them, how they manage their lives along with the journey. We've had some great feedback on Twitter already with some great questions, and we're going to bring those into the show. We hope you enjoy it. Again, it's the Tech Founder Odyssey on the New Stack Makers. You're watching the New Stack Makers, a podcast for people who develop, deploy, and manage at-scale software. For more conversations and articles, please visit thenewstack.io. Now on with the show. Hey everyone, Alex Williams here. We are here with Ryan Dahl, co-founder and CEO at Deno. Ryan, I have followed your career for some time. I am so excited to have you on the show. I wanted to ask first about Deno and what you could tell us about it. And then we had some questions that came in a few weeks ago. They were really good questions that came in over Twitter when I was just previewing this series that we're doing. And so I thought I'd ask some of those questions. I am going to want to ask about Deno, the brand, because I had said beforehand that I have been doing my research, and I understand that Deno, as in Fred Flintstone, is spelled D-I-N-O, but it's pronounced D-E-E-N-O. And so I'm wondering if there's a backstory there at all.
Well, first of all, hello. Well, the backstory is that it's an anagram of node, and the pronunciation was
Okay.
backported to fit the dinosaur character.
Nice.
Yeah.
Listen, tell us about Deno. Tell us about the company and what it is you're doing.
So we have a JavaScript runtime. It's pretty similar in essence to Node. I mean, it executes some JavaScript, but it's much more modern. So this project was started 4 years ago, a bit over 4 years ago. Basically, as a demo project, I was giving a conference talk and kind of thinking about Node and kind of reflecting on how it went after 10 years of it being out in the wild. Whenever you write some code, you kind of can't help but look back and hindsight is 20/20, right? Just started playing around with what it would be like to develop a kind of modern server-side JavaScript runtime these days, I didn't really think that this demo would go anywhere, but people got pretty interested in it, and we kept working on it. I think kind of the foundation of this is that there's many components to it. So for one thing, it's written in Rust instead of C++. It uses a different event loop library. It does use non-blocking I/O like Node does, but uses a lot of different infrastructure. But I think at its core, Deno is kind of fast and easy and secure. So we really put a lot of effort into driving a web server as fast as possible, kind of doing non-blocking I/O properly, and we use this library called Tokyo in Rust to do a lot of that. In Node days, we use something called libuv, so Tokyo kind of replaces libuv. We put a lot of effort into making this kind of developer friendly, easy to use, kind of working out of the box. In the Node world, in the Node NPM world, you have a lot of build tooling that's kind of been added to over the years, and it shows when you get started with a new project, especially if you want to use TypeScript. You tend to have to do all of this setup And yeah, our take is that this should be basically part of the runtime itself and built into the system. So Deno can do TypeScript transpilation, for example. That's kind of built in. It has kind of VS Code editor integration built in, and secure. It's we JavaScript, the V8 runtime that we use, V8 from being the JavaScript runtime of Chrome, is a secure sandbox. And in the Node days, we just plugged holes in that everywhere to kind of create servers and interact with the operating system, do server-side JavaScript. And of course, Deno plugs holes in that as well, but we put security checks in each hole so that you can kind of optionally control how your code is going to interact with the operating system, which is, pretty important, especially if you depend on open source dependencies that you have not necessarily audited and don't necessarily know what sort of things they're doing. So you can really, in Deno, you can run some code and kind of step through each of the attempts to access the system, whether that's like accessing some external server or accessing some file on your hard drive. You can kind of step through and either deny or allow each of those.
I'm curious about what you learned in terms of managing the Node.js project that you brought to Deno and how that has affected, your own management style. There's always learnings. You go from one project to another. I'm curious how you've learned how to manage it differently.
Sure. I think that's one of the main things that I'm trying to correct here with Deno is kind of the organizational structure around the project. These projects, Node, Deno, are not kind of small little software projects that you do on the weekends. These are pretty serious pieces of infrastructure that require many engineers to work on them for many years. They're doing all sorts of stuff, and when software reaches that sort of scale, the engineering costs become pretty non-trivial. You can't just not work for a few years at a time and kind of pour yourself into the project. I mean, for kind of smaller projects, maybe you can work on them during the weekend and give it away for free. When it comes to like something like Node, it's not even just it's not that I could just not work for years and work on it. I mean, it's bigger than that even. I mean, it really requires many software engineers and very talented software engineers at that. And this is like not free at all. In Node, I sold Node early on to my employer, Joyent, and that was a really good deal for me personally, but maybe not the best deal for the project. Joyent really saw Node as a I'd say advertising opportunity for their cloud business, and as such didn't really put the effort didn't put the resources that it should have into Node itself. And yeah, it kind of created a situation where it was like very clear in like, let's say 2011 that like Node was really taking off and was going to be a very big deal, but didn't really have the ability to hire engineers to work on this and kind of direct effort as necessary, because there wasn't a direct revenue stream attached to it. It was, essentially this advertising opportunity. The end result of this is kind of there's this IO.js fork of this. This was essentially some of my open source collaborators revolting, kind of a mutiny against Joyent happening because they wanted control of the project and Joyent wasn't really doing anything with it. And I think ultimately reached a compromise where Node moved into the Linux Foundation, which is a nonprofit organization for managing open source projects. I think that's a good place for Node to end up. But it does, it is kind of managed by, a couple of representatives from large companies whose main interest is seeing that it does not make backwards incompatible changes. It's not that it's trying to achieve anything necessarily. It's just trying to not break all of the existing software written for Node. It doesn't have this real kind of drive behind it. And there's some budget. They can pay people to work on some stuff, but there's not really a singular direction or really a core philosophy behind what's going on there. I think it's pretty clear that that Node is very useful software. I mean, it's used by millions of people, and it's doesn't take much to imagine how this could be generating some revenue by itself, if not directly, then kind of 1 degree separated from some revenue. So with Deno, this is organized as a for-profit company, and we are explicitly generating revenue because this is useful software, and I think the software can be made better if it's not just this amorphous nonprofit that's running it. So with Deno, our product is something called Deno Deploy, which is a serverless system that essentially you give us a JavaScript function that takes a request and returns a response, and we manage that infrastructure for you. So we deploy that to data centers around the world, and you can give us a domain name, and we'll hook it up to that function, and you can serve requests from that. It's a lot more advanced than what I've described. You can have imports. You can kind of generate HTML at the edge. It's can do kind of real-time communication. It's how we imagine that kind of the easiest possible server can be written.
It sounds like you've learned so much over these past several years from being I don't know if you were a technical lead at Joyent or if you were a staff engineer, what your role was there. But you make decisions in your life that have a real impact, and you don't really see those impacts until much later in life. And that's kind of what I'm sensing here. It's like you learned a lot from that.
I would say so. There's a lot of learning over the past 12 years or so that I've been working in this space.
How have you gone through your own transition from being a hardcore engineer to an engineer who is also a CEO? Like how do you manage that yourself? How do you approach that? How do you approach that in your day-to-day work?
I'd say it's relatively challenging because I feel, I like programming a lot and would ideally be spending most of my time in an editor solving programming problems. That's not really what the job of being a CEO is like. There's a lot more communications. I mean, I think in not setting aside kind of founding startups and stuff, I think just kind of being a manager in general. I mean, you're kind of operating at a larger scale, right? There's many engineers working on a project, and you're trying to get them to work together effectively and kind of deliver features and make sure that you're working on the right problems. And that just requires a lot of communications, and so if you want to work on big software, then it's at some point you kind of have to accept that there's going to be meetings and communication and that sort of stuff, and less time for working on individual problems. I think at the end of the day, I'm trying to accomplish. I'm trying to build some software that people use, as I said, I think this is kind of the right thing to do at the moment. But yeah, I mean, personally, I would much prefer to kind of sip some coffee and kind of work through some broken tests or whatever.
I can totally relate to that. I mean, I started as a journalist and, went into founding the news stack and, and as a publisher, I don't have the opportunity to write. I miss those days of sipping coffee and writing stories for sure. So I can totally relate to what you're saying there. So, what Lee Calcote is a colleague of mine, and he replied to me my question on Twitter when I asked about, what kind of questions you would ask engineers who are founding a company. And he asked, by what principles do founding engineers prioritize their tasks in terms of time? And how do they or don't they muster the discipline to stick to those priorities? And I thought that was a good question. It kind of relates, I think, to some of the challenges I think that you were talking about you face.
I take it one day at a time. I don't know if if I have like a fundamental theory of management or anything. I'm just trying to solve the problems as they come. I think what I realize is that as an engineer, like I don't want to be interrupted with meetings. I don't want to have too much overhead kind of communicating with people. Things should be as asynchronous as possible. And so I try to create that environment for the people that are working on Deno, and try to have very productive conversations, short productive conversations. We try to pair program a lot. We're a pretty remotely distributed team. We're kind of founded during the pandemic and growing out of an open source project. And so we've got people all around the world. And so luckily these days you have Google Meets and it's really easy to screen share with somebody. And so we try to have pair programming sessions. And I think that's a good way to, both socialize, but also kind of dip your toes into different problems that are being worked on. But yeah, generally, I mean, we're just trying to solve the problems as they come up. And so, at different times that can mean fundraising, or that can mean, dealing with HR issues, or that can mean, actually diving into some code and working on something. But yeah, it's, I think, managing a company, you're kind of, the buck stops here sort of mentality. And you're trying to, get people in place to kind of take care of issues and build the system. But at the end of the day, I mean, there's always stuff falling through the cracks. And so I'm just kind of dealing with everything else that happens basically.
Well, you're talking about growing, about managing asynchronously. Maybe you could talk a little bit about what you mean by that, because it kind of relates almost to the nature of programming itself. I'm curious on how you think about managing asynchronously.
Yeah, I mean, my claim to fame is like bringing asynchronous sockets to the mainstream, right? With non-blocking IO and stuff. So asynchronous is kind of deeply embedded in what I'm thinking about. But I guess when it comes to company organization, asynchronous means that we have rotating meeting schedules to adapt to people in different time zones. We do a lot of meeting recordings. So if you can't make it for whatever reason, you're not in the right time zone, you're picking up your kids, whatever, you can go back and watch a recording. So we basically record every meeting. We try to keep the meeting short. I think that's important because nobody wants to watch hours and hours of videos. And we use chats a lot. And chat and email are forms of asynchronous communication where you don't need to kind of meet with people one-on-one. And yeah, I guess the other aspect of that is just keeping meetings to a minimum. Like there's few situations where you really need to get everybody in the room and like everybody's situation. I mean, there are certainly times when you need to do that, but I try to avoid that as much as possible because I think that really disrupts the flow of a lot of people working.
A lot of people who are in these roles have families. They have lives clearly outside of their work. How are you able to manage it? all of the work plus your personal life? I mean, it was a question people have. One, I don't know if you have kids, but I mean, this might relate to anyone though. How much work is taken on by, a significant other? Lots of technical founders are only able to do what they do because their partner is lifting a lot in the background. They hardly ever get the credit though. That was a question that someone asked. And I don't know, what is your situation similar to that or not?
Yeah, well, I just had a baby last December, so she's 8 months old, and it's definitely challenging to have a young baby. Thanks. Yeah, I mean, it's wonderful, but also running a startup at the same time is challenging. My partner and I both work from home here, so I think that makes things quite easy. And we live in New York City, and so the daycare is just a block away. And so, I think we've tried to organize our lives in ways to kind of minimize overhead. We can kind of wake up and play with the baby for a few hours and take her to daycare and do our own work for a few hours, and then have some family time in the evening. I think anybody with kids knows that this sucks up like 100% of your free time, and it's kind of challenging. I think you just deal with it. I think it's fine, and you. Yeah, I don't know what to say about that. I mean, you just kind of take those challenges as they come. I certainly at other parts of my life, I've had a lot of free time to work on individual problems for very long periods of just kind of sit down and hack all night and stuff. I don't really have that luxury anymore. But also, I'm not really in the place where that's super useful anymore either. I'm more trying to organize our company for the most part.
How much time are you able to spend coding now, and what are some of the fun things that you're doing that you're really enjoying? Is it just helping around kind of everywhere in the company, or is it specific things?
It's like I said, it's kind of diving in where necessary, and where, in particular, if I have there's certain parts of the stack that I'm kind of the most familiar person. So in that case, I might dive into that area. I think more commonly it's about kind of helping guide problems. Maybe recently we're running a bunch of different benchmarks, and so kind of analyzing different systems and kind of creating examples and kind of guiding our overarching benchmarking stuff. How much do I program per day? I'd say 1 hour at most. Not too much, unfortunately. I hope I hope at some point that we can kind of get past some of our initial struggles and hire the right managers, and I'll have the opportunity to spend more time there. But yeah, not too much these days.
Well, Ryan, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate your candidness and your technology that you're building. I could talk to you about the technical elements quite a bit on what you're doing there. We were trying to understand a little bit more what it's like to be an engineer turned to CEO, and you've helped in that regard. So thank you very much.
Cool. Yeah. Thanks, Alex.
If you like this video, please give us a thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more videos like this, you can always subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're on all the major social media platforms. You can always find us at thenewstack.io. We hope to see you soon.